Tonight, the Red Lanterns are just far out and totally A-OK, man. Talon shows us what happens if Two-Face decided to double up and become One-Face, and Teen Titans finally give us the origin story for Kid Flash, because that's what was missing from this book all along. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 122 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and Happy New Year! It is literally January 1st as I am not recording this. Obviously I had to record it beforehand, but saying this to you, assuming you watch it as the episode comes out, as you should, it's January 1st. Happy New Year! But here's the thing. I would love to go on this whole long tirade thing, this little chat where I pretend like you're talking back at me and I say stuff about New Year's, but DC decided to put out 16 comics, and whenever there are 16 comics, my little timer that I use to make sure that the episodes don't go too long tells me that I can only talk about each comic for 6 minutes, if even. So, I didn't do that for any of them. I went over on essentially every single comic, which means that this episode is going to be long. Very, very long. I think I kept it under 2 hours, but the more I talk here, the less I think it will be. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say the comics that are coming out in this episode, then I'm going to talk about those comics, and then I might say 3 words at the end of the episode just to wrap it all up. So, this week, what do we have? We have Batman the Dark Knight, Batwoman, Catwoman, Talon, Superman, Superman Unchained, Larfleeze, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, Flash, All-Star Western, Green Team, Teen Titans, Justice League Dark, Damian Son of Batman, and Forever Evil Argus. Not necessarily in that order. In fact, pretty much the opposite part of the way through there. But of note there, Forever Evil Argus is, of course, part of Forever Evil, and Justice League Dark is part of Forever Evil Blight. So, that's all coming up. I'm going to go ahead and get started with those event books, and then I'll meet you at the end where I say something vaguely holiday related. So let's go. Forever Evil Argus number 3, written by Sterling Gates, art by Neil Edwards. So last issue we had a lot of stuff, but the big thing was Steve Trevor entered the Room of Wonder, which is just where he keeps all of his excess stuff. So this issue opens up outside of DC. There's this eclipse and everything is going on. Forever Evil's just starting. And we have Dr. Hoshi Light, who is the wife of Dr. Light, being approached by an Argus agent saying, hey, we're going to get you to a safe house because there's a lot of weird stuff going on. And immediately she's like, I don't know. I think it might be better if we stay here. But then the kid runs in. They have kids. And the kid runs in and says, hey, Daddy's in the living room. And he says it's okay for us to stay. And immediately the wife and the agent are like, all right, well, something's wrong here. So they go out and there's Dr. Light in his weird light form. Argus agent's aiming a gun at him. And his wife tries to get in the way and puts her hand out, and then the Argus agent grabs it saying, get out of the way. And immediately Dr. Light freaks out, uses his light abilities to just incinerate this dude, and also set a good amount of the house on fire. And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And all the kids are afraid. He's like, don't be afraid of me. I love you. And then he just disappears in a flash of light. So then we flash back to 5 years ago, and we get Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman fighting against something called the Calcotoroi, which apparently interrupted their date night. So they're in all fancy dress as they fight this thing. And as they take it down, Steve's like, look, hey, the thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight is I've been put in charge of this thing called A.R.G.U.S, and we're going to be working with you as the Justice League. That's a whole thing now. And immediately she's like, A.R.G.U.S, that's weird. In my mythology, A.R.G.U.S is a 1,000-eyed god who saw everything and watched everyone. So that's kind of really on the nose naming. And Trevor's like, I didn't name it. I don't know anything about that. So at that point, Wonder Woman turns around, leaps at him, and it turns out that she's one of the weird sisters. They have different names, but the Morai is what they call them here. And turns out this is actually just a memory that's being drained out of Steve Trevor because he has summoned the Morai and he's trying to get them to like do a deal with them, but he still owes them for something else. So they suck out this particular memory and then say, oh, that's good. You cared about her so much. And then like, she didn't see eye to eye with you on the whole Argus thing. Oh, God, so much emotion there. We love feeding on emotions. And Steve's immediately like, okay, look, here's the thing. I don't remember what you're talking about anymore. I don't care. So can we get a deal or what? And they're just like, okay, well, what do you want to offer us? And he's like, you know what I'll offer you. And we never actually get the full up and up on what exactly he's offering, but apparently it's a lot. And just like, oh, okay, so what is it you're looking for? And he's like, well, I want to know how to save Diana, and I guess the rest of the Justice League too. And they show him a mirror and show that all of the Justice League is currently being kept inside of Firestorm. And he's just like, what? That doesn't help. I don't know where Firestorm is. I don't know how to get them out. That's not upholding your end of the deal. And the two of the sisters are like, tough luck. Like we're pulling a genie on you. You should have been more specific. But then one of them's like, okay, hold on. He is offering like a lot up to us. So what we will, and he says that, you know, it's something to do with Diana and his heart and whatnot. So she says, okay, we're gonna make you a deal. We're going to give you a little bit of help along in your journey. So they teleport him out and send him to a cabin out in the middle of nowhere where there's a lake nearby, and he recognizes what it is, and he says Stein and implies, oh, this is the guy who helped make Firestorm. He's the one in charge of the Firestorm protocols. So all he has is a sword that he picked up when he was in the Room of Wonder. No guns or anything like that. And he walks inside the cabin. The door's left open. And inside he sees Killer Frost in there threatening Professor Stein. So at that point, Killer Frost launches an attack against Steve. Steve has no idea what's special about the sword. And as soon as he gets hit by a icicle, it immediately shoots into flames. And he's like, oh, right. It's a special sword that fights against ice with fire. So he comes in and starts attacking Killer Frost. Meanwhile, we cut to Etta Candy, who, if you remember, last issue was put into the green room with the president. And it's essentially just a panic room. And there's a voice in the green room that's like, hey, Etta, we got special stuff we want you to see. And he's like, what do you mean we? It's like, oh, me and the founders of Argus. And immediately it's like, what? What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden a magic door appears and Etta steps inside. So apparently whoever's the narrator of the green room has something going on with him. So a fight continues on between Steve and Killer Frost. Looks like Killer Frost has the upper hand and is about to kill her until Professor Stein steps out of his cabin with a shotgun and shoots her right in the chest. And she's like, oh my God, you shot me. And he's like, yeah, and I'll shoot you in the head too. Back off. So at that point, Trevor says like, hey, look, here's the thing. I need your help. Firestorm's out there and we have to take care of him because the Justice League's with him. And immediately Killer Frost is like, oh, hey, Firestorm's alive? That's literally the whole reason I was here. I just wanted another Firestorm because I thought the original was dead. So I'm on your side now. So they map out a plan, and essentially it's Martin Stein is just giving the full explanation to the audience. The Firestorm protocol is meant to work with two people. If there are like 25 people inside of Firestorm right now, what is going to end up happening is he will die, explode, and essentially restart the universe in a new Big Bang. Not necessarily in that order. So Trevor's like, all right, well, that's an issue. Meanwhile, we cut to Firestorm, more specifically Ronnie, whose like floating head is just looking over his body. And Deathstorm walks in and is just like, hey, man, I can see you. We run off the same thing. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to teach me how to make kryptonite, or else I'm going to kill you inside your own body. So then we cut to LA, and there's some mysterious figures who are told they should be waiting here for Dr. Light to appear. Their readings say he's going to pop out here. All of a sudden he does. They use some sort of gun, I guess. It looks like a cotton candy gun that manages to pull down Dr. Light, and it's just like, hey, Dr. Light, you're hurt, you're not stable, we can help you out, and we know that you don't like what Argus did with you, so we can reunite you with your family and get you revenge against Argus. And immediately Dr. Light's like, okay, but who are you? And they reveal themselves as the Crimson Men, which seem to be like Nazis. They they look like Nazis. So that's the issue, saying, and we'd like you to help us change this world. Solid, fine, good. I'm not that upset about it. This definitely felt more like okay, we've set up all the mysteries. Now we're finally just going to start taking steps forward here. We've established Dr. Light's working with someone now. We've established that Trevor, Stein, and Killer Frost are off doing their thing now. Edda's still a bit of a mystery, but that'll end up being something. All of it's just moving forward at a nice steady pace. I wouldn't say anything crazy happened to this issue, but we're getting there. So overall, I think this one is probably a 7. It's a fine issue, just not stand out in any meaningful capacity, but never really expected that out of this book, so whatever. Justice League Dark number 26, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Mikel Janín. So last issue, this is part of Forever Evil Blight. Last issue was in Pandora, and everyone was killed by Blight. But it was revealed that they had a special spell or something in place so that they could get their bodies to Dr. 13. So we see John Constantine narrating. His head was actually decapitated, and he sees everyone floating around in the void. And as they float around the void, Blight shows up, and he's like, yeah, you idiot, what did you think was going to happen? You took on the personification of, bad vibes. What do you think was going to happen here? And as they're floating around, Constantine's like, oh, yes, I'm an idiot. How dare I think that I could make such an impact? And then all of a sudden, his decapitated head is grabbed by Deadman, who says, hey, focus up. We need you to save us. All of us. Zatanna, Xanadu, we're all here. Help. And he tosses Constantine's heads away as they all suddenly start floating up towards a light. And that light is Terrence 13 bringing them back to life. And he's like, hey, I did it. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And immediately Nightmare Nurse grabs the rod that he was using. And she's like, this is my rod. I sent it to you and gave you psychic instructions on how to do this because we knew it would happen. So really, this was all my doing. You didn't do anything. And he's like, man, come on, give me a little bit of credit. So at that point, they get around talking just okay, what are we supposed to do here? And immediately Constantine's like, all right, we need to get the Justice League Dark free in order to beat Blight, which is a problem because the whole reason we were trying to beat Blight was to be able to free the Justice League Dark. So we're in a little bit of a conundrum here. And then Constantine reveals, but I now have a little bit of extra oomph because Deadman contacted me. He's alive as much as he can be. And they're like, dude, you were dead. You were having nightmare visions. That's probably just your guilt. And I was like, no, if it was my guilt, that would be Zatanna. I would never in a million years think of Boston Brand. So immediately Nightmare Nurse pulls out some weird little scalpel or something, gets some blood from the back of his skull. And Pandora is able to use that blood to say, yep, he's right. That was an authentic vision. There's some leftover psychic residue or something like that. So it's just all right. So I guess our option now is we need to figure out where in the hell is Deadman? Meanwhile, at this point, Phantom Stranger and Terrence 13 just kind of duck out because they're more concerned about the body of Chris, who is the host of Blight. So they're just doing their own thing. Meanwhile, everyone else, they're managing to follow the psychic vibrations deep, deep into the ocean. We have Swamp Thing essentially turning into a giant green blue whale, humpback whale, whatever you want to call it, and diving his way deep. And it looks like there's nothing around, but as they approach this little clearing area, all of a sudden the psychic emanations get stronger, and they see that there's a portal down into a deep area called Nan Madol, which is apparently an undersea kingdom that was 1,000,000 years prior to Atlantis. And it is essentially the crossover point to the afterlife for undersea life. So at that point, Swamp Thing tries to reach out to the green around here, and he's like, all right, well, I can feel, it's weird. It's an ancient type of green, but I can feel some stuff. And also, hey, that's Sea King over there. And they look over and see the dead body of the Earth 3 Aquaman, who has ended up down here because he's from the ocean in his world. So when he died over here, he kind of just got pulled this direction. But then all of a sudden, he shoots up awake and slashes Swamp Thing. And he's like, oh, I am here to take back Nan Madol, and we will take over the world and lead our people back to glory. And immediately they're just like, what? Dude, you were dead, and also what? So they start fighting against him as best they can. They have no idea why they were led here. But Pandora manages to piece it together like, no, you're not getting this. That's Deadman. He's inside that body. He's in there. But at that point, Sea King is like saying some weird sort of chant that summons all of the dead ancient sea creatures from Nan Madol, and they just start going up to the surface, ready to attack. So at that point, we see giant tidal waves are coming down on ships. So we have our little Justice League Dark here trying to save everybody in the water, making sure that they stay alive, whereas a few of them go and attack Sea King. Until finally we get the part where Pandora manages to make a knife, and then Constantine blows a spell on it, chucks it into Sea King's forehead, and that is enough to stop all the storms. Everything goes calm, and Sea King looks as though he's dead. So they drag his body into the shore, and Deadman finally starts talking. He's like, hey, yeah, no, it's me. You killed the other consciousness. He was not totally dead when I possessed his body, because I saw that the crime syndicate was absorbing people, so I just jumped into his body. He was still kind of alive, and his evil was too much for me, and it essentially put me in a dissociative state. So I'm in this body now. And Constantine's like, great, cool. Click. I'm locking you into that body now because I need you to have a physical form. And frankly, this is pretty useful. So he's locked in there. And they say, all right, cool. We got Deadman. Now we can finally make some moves against Blight. And we cut across to, hey, what's Phantom Stranger doing? Turns out he has betrayed Terrence 13 to Blight and is saying, hey, yep, here he is. Now I'm joining your side. So Phantom Stranger's turned evil and has turned against goodness. Who would have thought he was capable of that? It's honestly, I like this reveal because I like the fact that Sea King showed up in that Justice League issue, immediately died, but we're still doing something with him. Because, yeah, Deadman, like, that's his whole thing. Like, he's able to possess people, even if they're recently dead. I think we established that at one point. So, yeah, I like it. I think it's a clever way to bring him back and get him to still be a character here. Beyond that, I mean, not a whole lot happens. I could have gone without the whole thing of Phantom Stranger turning, but I have a feeling he's probably the next issue that we're going to have, so we'll see how that wraps up there. All in all, I think I'm going to give it like a 7.5, but that 0.5 is mainly for the Janín art. It looks great. I actually really enjoy it, but it's a pretty whatever story. Also, giant whale swamp thing. That was also cool. So yeah, 7.5 for this. Looking forward to the next one. Batman The Dark Knight number 26, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by Alberto Ponticelli. This is part one of Voiceless, which, if you couldn't tell by the name, is essentially the entire thing is told without any sort of speech bubbles. So because of that, I don't really have character names, so I'm going to go with mother, daughter, grandmother, and baby, and Batman. So we pick up somewhere, I think it's Mexico, and there's a woman working essentially in a sweatshop. She's making some sort of Christmas ornaments, and she ends up breaking the one she's working on. Apparently that is one too many over her quota, so she is shown the door and is fired. And as she returns back home to a little rundown house, we see that her baby is sick and is not doing well, so she immediately runs down to the pharmacy, which is just locking up. She tries to offer some money to the pharmacist, but he says no. He drives away, and when the mother gets back home, the baby has died. So we get a brief little stop at a cemetery. One of the people there hands over a postcard of Gotham and gives her the impression of, you should go here. It's better than where you're currently at. And as we see the young daughter, the child, is also getting sick, she finally gives in and talks to a man who is able to get her across the border. So we see them loading up the truck, and as they start driving, they get pulled over by a bunch of men in skull masks. Everyone goes running, but are immediately captured. And we see it was a setup the whole time. The guy who was driving the truck sold them out. So the mother gets separated from the child. Child's left with the grandmother, and the mother goes in a separate truck, and she's hit in the face with a gun butt, and then has to watch as her child is taken away from her again. So cut to Gotham. There's another sweatshop just like right across from Gotham Square, where these children are forced to do this work. And the grandmother's there as well. And the child looks out and sees Gotham and just like, oh no, what happened? There's another building called Holiday Cheer Incorporated, where the mother is being held along with a bunch of other women. And a woman next to her gets picked for something. It's not implied what. But then the mother manages to see outside and sees, oh, hey, wait, that's the Gotham skyline. I'm here. So cut back to the grandmother. The child's still not doing well, and so the grandmother's like, okay, I need to get some help. So she tries sneaking around. She accidentally steps on a bell that was left on the ground. Guy notices her, chases after her, stabs her, but she falls out of a window down to the ground below. Guy goes down to check it out, but she's not there anymore. So the guy has to report it to the person in charge, who is Penguin. And Penguin immediately is just like, dude, Batman's gonna find out. And so he stabs this guy in the chest. We see the old woman stumbling through the streets until finally her wounds catch up with her and she falls down dead in an alley. So Batman immediately is there, swoops down, manages to find a piece of paper she has in her fist that sends back to the sweatshop she was working at. And Batman sees it and just like, all right, let's go. So kid wakes up, alarms are going crazy. She sees all the other kids running out of the room. Meanwhile, she's praying for an angel to show up. And then as soon as her little thought bubble disappears, Batman's shadow is there to take its place. So he crashes into the window, gets the little girl out to safety, sends her to the hospital, and then says, all right, time to finish this up. So he heads back in and immediately starts wrecking shop, just taking out all the guy in the Skulls masks. He gets all the old women and children out, leads them outside the building, but they are immediately met with even more men in masks who actually are enough to overpower Batman. They've got like dozens of net cannon guns that just wrap Batman up to the point where he can't escape. And so we cut back to the Iceberg Lounge where these guys have brought Batman all tied up to Penguin. And he's like, Jesus, all right, cool. This is great. Happy New Year to me. So, yeah, that's the issue. I'm sure it'll wrap up in part 2. But, I mean, I'm always a sucker for a gimmick issue. You can go ahead and do whatever and just say, like, but it's special this time. And I'm like, yeah, I love it. It's great. I will say that it's good, but it's a very stylized art. And so it actually takes a little bit to try to figure out, like, who are these the same people between panels? It's just a bit, like, heavy on the ink, so it's hard to tell, but it's not bad. It's a very well told story. I understood everything it was getting across here. There were a few things I had to like reread a little bit, but it made sense. It wasn't something where I'm just guessing at what's happening. So yeah, overall, I mean, like I said, sucker for a gimmick issue. I'll give this one an 8. I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it wraps up next month. Batwoman number 26, written by Marc Andreyko, art by Jeremy Haun. This is the first issue officially of Marc Andreyko's run, and it's called Webs. So we pick up in Gotham in 1929, where we see this mysterious man with a scarf running through the streets, and he's like, all right, I gotta remain strong. After all the pain this guy has caused, he deserves this, so I need to make him feel despair at like what has happened. And he runs up into someone's apartment, not sure who. It's filled with art pieces, and we see this guy just hangs himself in this art place until finally he's found by police and detectives and whatnot. So cut to present day, and we meet our new person who I don't think we have a name for yet. He is currently stealing art out of someone's apartment, and turns out that the guy heard him. He's got a gun, and so he comes out, shots firing at our villain, but the villain fires off poison darts from his hands, and he's like, oh, well, you shot first, so that was just defense, bye. And turns out this guy's already dead by this point as our villain sneaks out the window. So now we cut over to a guy named Evan. He's rich, and he is throwing a big party, socialite thing where they're looking at a bunch of art pieces around his place. And we've got Kate and Maggie there as well. Apparently Kate is old friends with Evan. So at that point, Maggie's like, hey, look, it's been great. I got to go, though. things to do tomorrow, and gives Kate a kiss goodbye and walks off. And Evan's just like, hey, yeah, quite a catch. Maggie's pretty cool. And she's like, yeah, but things are complicated between us. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I want to marry her, but for reasons I can't get into, that's proving very difficult. The reasons are editorial. So at that point, they ruminate about the old days. It's just like, oh, yeah, we were always getting into trouble together. And like, when we got caught that one time, like sneaking into a movie or whatever, they thought that we were a couple. And so that kept them from figuring out that we were both gay for however much longer. And they're like, yeah, no, totally. So at this point, he starts asking, like, hey, since your girlfriend's a cop, what does she know about that break-in where the guy was hit with poison darts? And she's like, I don't know. It's just break-in. I don't know what to tell you. And he's like, right, I just want to know if I should beef up security because I've got tons of art here. And he's like, well, I don't know. It's not my jurisdiction. So at that point, Bet shows up, says, hey, Evan, how's it going? And then he's like, good. Anyway, I'm going to go back in and socialize. And then Kate's just like, hey, you want to get out of here? And she's like, yeah, no, totally. I didn't even want to be here to begin with. So they head back to Kate's apartment, and Bet's immediately in her Flamebird costume. And she's just like, hey, you want to go out? You want to do something? You want to hit some criminals? And Kate's like, I don't know. I got a big day tomorrow. And she's just like, oh, come on. You're not going to turn this down. He's like, all right, fine. So they go out, and we see that the villain is once again breaking into an apartment. And I think it's Evan's apartment. I think that's established. It's after the party now at this point. So silent alarm goes off. Security center gets the call, sends it to police, which, of course, Kate intercepts. And she's just like, oh, hey, we should probably take care of this one because it's the party we literally just came from. So they fly over, and they come across the villain inside there. And he's just like, hey, what's going on? How's it? What are you doing here? And immediately they leap into action saying, hey, you've steal this stuff. And yeah, he's got a ton of his art on his backpack. And he manages to take care of Bet pretty easily. Just grabs her by the ponytail and swings her around. But then when Kate shows up, she punches him in the face. And he's just like, okay, all right, fair enough. I'm going to go now. And so he fires off a grappling hook at her. And he's just like, no, I'm still going to keep beating you up. You can't just get away that easily. He punches him again in the face, and he pleads like, okay, I surrender. I give up. And then he fires off some poison darts into Kate's face. And Kate's like, oh, all right, that's toxic. Something's going on now. So he takes the momentary relapse that she has to kick her in the chest through a window. And then as they reach the end of a balcony, he punches her again, and she goes falling off the building as it seems that she is unable to recover because she is poisoned. So yeah, that's that. I'm trying to read the back of this real quick. Wolf Spider. It is Wolf Spider. We never get that name. That is not in here at all. But it is Wolf Spider. So I think Wolf Spider's written actually pretty well. He's kind of funny the whole way through. He cracks some good one-liners. If they keep that up, I'm all right with him as a villain. I'm curious what that first page thing was about the guy who went and hung himself. Like, we didn't get an explanation on that. I'm sure we will, but like, I have no idea how it can tie in right now. So, I don't know. It was a fine issue. As for a first issue from Marc Andreyko, yeah. I mean, I'm interested to see what he does. It's just such a bummer. They even mentioned the fact of like, oh yeah, after everything that happened between you and the DEO when we went to rescue Alice. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we'll read about that in 4 months' time. So, such a bummer. But regardless, this was a fine enough issue. I'll go ahead and give it a 7.5. It's fine, not amazing, but definitely worth a read. Catwoman number 26, written by Nocenti, art by Rafa Sandoval. So what happened last issue? It was 0 year. What happened before that? I don't know, but definitely not this. So we open up and Joker's daughter is being trapped in wax. Apparently that's Tinderbox's power. It happened between the issues that last issue we flooded the underground because of Joker's daughter. Then a bunch of fire was launched by Dr. Phosphorus. And then Tinderbox trapped Joker's daughter in wax. Just accept that. So We see Catwoman, who was swept up in the currents, makes her way down to rock bottom, and there she finds Dr. Phosphorus's diamond hoard, that is that special gem bomb. And we see up on top Dr. God, I can't remember her name. Alice Tesla? Yeah, Alice Tesla. Her whole place exploded because she was messing around with the gem bombs as well. And she's like, oh, geez, that's crazy. Anyway, so she gets a call from Catwoman saying, hey, are you still good up there? What's going on? She's like, oh, yeah, no, totally. I found out something. I found this frequency that causes gem bombs to explode. Have a listen. So she turns it up, but then immediately Catwoman's like, I'm standing next to a bunch. Please turn it off. So immediately she turns it off. She's like, ooh, yeah, sorry. Okay. She's like, yeah, anyway, send me that frequency, but like as a file so I can hear it later. So Rat Tail's there and he's just like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, I've got a whole plan. Come on down. So Tinderbox go back to Dr. Phosphorus and says, hey, I trapped Joker's daughter. That was the thing I did. And he's like, you've done pretty well, my daughter. Anyway, let's go. My stockpiles are full enough. Let's go take over the overworld. Then we see a tunnel leading to rock bottom. The warhogs that were kicked out of their bunker are now walking their way down. Father, son, and a third one. They make a big deal of like, oh, my son, I will not be long for this world. And if I don't survive, you must head back to the bunker and take it over as is your rightful place. And we see the son is like irradiated and has biohazard symbols all over him saying like, oh, science will save the world from itself. I know it. So it shows that Catwoman's whole plan is they're going to take these gem bombs, put them up in the roof of the underground, and then they're going to activate the frequency in order to escape. They're just going to bail out. And they have to be in a very specific place so as to not be crushed by rocks, but also be able to get up quickly. So they find the cat, Joker's daughter's cat, survived. Sure. And we see Catwoman making her way in through a tunnel and finds the Warhogs. And the leader of the Warhogs is like, hey, you stole my vial of chemical whatever from me. I need it back. And Catwoman's like, okay. Like, she doesn't fight at all. She's like, sure, what are you going to do with it? And he's like, oh, I'm going to drink it, and that's going to be my final form. I'll be able to take on Dr. Phosphorus because I'll be immune to his atomic fire stuff. So he downs it. We see Catwoman heading back into the Nethers and comes across Joker's daughter frozen in wax and is like, hey, Joker's daughter, I need your help because I'm going to be causing a large explosion, and I need you to turn on the water to basically quell the fires afterwards. Blink once if you'll agree to help me. And she blinks once, so Catwoman frees her from the wax, and then immediately Joker's daughter's like, haha, I betrayed you. Who would have thought that I would have done that? So Catwoman's about to get hit with Joker's daughter's staff, but then she says, we have your cat. And she's like, damn you. All right, fine, I guess I'll help. So, yeah. Anyway, we show Dr. Phosphorus is fighting against the Warhog leader. It's just happening. The cat is still there, and for some reason Joker's daughter is like really concerned the fact that it's just in the middle of things. Oh no, sorry, it's waxed up. My bad. Tinderbox waxed it up. So at this point we see the whole plan starts going into motion. She calls up Warhog. The frequency is set off early though by Dr. Phosphorus, who's like, haha, this is the ace up my sleeve. So immediately the gem bombs on the roof start going off, and I swear to God, Dr. Phosphorus has the weirdest reasoning here. As the roof starts collapsing, he's like, what? What were my gem bombs doing up there? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. As long as the world burns, we will survive. And then the very next panel, he says, oh, wait, but the rocks are going to crush all my gem bombs. I'm doomed. Sure. So at that point, the fight continues. We show the Joker's daughter set a timer for the water to go off, so it goes off at the perfect time here to quell any fire from going up into Gotham. Joker's daughter kicks Tinderbox under a falling rock, kills her, and everyone else manages to climb up to safety. So in the end, we see Dr. Phosphorus is upset that his daughter died. The Warhog son is upset that his father died. And the rest of the Warhogs in the bunker are like, oh crap, we don't have any women. We're all going to die in here. So, yep. And then the final page is Catwoman and crew making their way back up north. She's got a little bag full of some duds of diamonds that didn't go off, which, like, how did she get those? That doesn't make any sense. But she talks to Dr. Tesla and says like, oh, hey, your lab exploded. I'll sell some of these things and help fund your rebuilding. Also, wasn't there a whole thing that Gotham's rich and elite have all those exploding diamonds? What's going to happen to them? And Tesla's like, oh, it's no worry. The frequency is so like impossible to reach that no one in a million years will ever be around that. And we show a rich woman sitting at an opera as the fat lady sings. It's a 4. I don't like this book. There's only so many times I can say that. I do appreciate the fact that it feels like we finally wrapped up everything. It feels like there's no like loose thread that Nocenti's going to come back next issue and say like, but you see, we're continuing based off that. Like, no, Rat Tail is fine. Joker's daughter is taken care of to some extent. All these diamonds are done with. Everything in the underground is destroyed. Like, nothing is left. And so we can start just a new plot that doesn't feel like it's trying to continue some random thing that was started like 7 issues ago. Remember, this all started when Penguin and Catwoman were fighting for turf. I hate all of this. It's a 4. And the only reason I'm giving it a 4 is because I'm happy this arc is done. This trade is done. I'm so happy about that. It probably deserves less, but I'm giving it a 4. Damian, Son of Batman, number 3, written and art by Andy Kubert. So last issue, Damian took up the mantle of Batman and then started going after Professor Pig. And it didn't end well for him. So this issue picks up with him plummeting off of this huge skyrise down into the alley below. And apparently he manages to flip off and land in the Gotham River. And only because it is so polluted and so disgusting is he able to essentially stay afloat as he washes up to shore nearby, where Alfred, who, despite being so pissed off against Damian, did track him, does know he's here, pulls him out of the river and is like, okay, you're like mostly dead, so I'm going to have to fix you up. And he takes him home, does all of his medical stuff on him, and as he finishes up and gets him into a like stable state, he's like, okay, I am too old for this, and I just dragged like a 20-something-year-old out of the river and the whole way home, so I need some tea. And as he sits down for some tea, he collapses and dies. And sitting next to him was Alfred the cat, who is a cat that Damian named Alfred. And Alfred the cat runs over to Damian's bed as Damian starts to wake up, and then starts talking in Alfred's voice. And Damian's like, I'm sorry, what is happening right now? And the cat doesn't explain. He's just like, oh, Master Damian, you must get up. It's highly important. The Professor Pig's henchmen are at it again. And Damian's like, what? Huh? Okay. So we go across town and we see a bunch of gorillas in like clown gear. One of them's jackanapes, and there's also a shark. So they've got a school bus full of kids that they've hijacked, and just like, oh yeah, we're going to take these guys back to Professor Pig, and it's going to be a great payday for us. And the shark guy's being extra menacing because he wants to eat the kids. But then they see as they're driving, Batman just kicks through the front windshield right in the jackanapes face. And it's a pretty decent fight scene that comes out here, but Damian's making the concerted effort of like, I'm not going to kill them. It's against everything I feel like I should do, but I'm not going to kill them. So he gets them very, very wounded and then says, oh, police are here. They're gonna take care of the rest of them. The kids are all safe. So yeah, I gotta go and talk to the one man who might understand this. And he goes to the church again and he talks to the father and says like, hey, I'm being Batman. I didn't kill those guys, but like, you know, I did what I had to do. And the father's just like, oh, you had no other choice. You had to do this to become Batman. And he's like, yeah, I know, but like, it's really hard for me not to kill. And he's just like, it's whatever. But then the guy says like, look, Professor Pig doesn't matter. You'll get him eventually. What's really important right now is you still have to get the Joker. And Damian's immediately like, I never told you about the Joker. Who the hell are you? And so he comes out, tries to track down the father. No idea. He's just gone. He disappeared into the wind. So They bury Alfred. There's not many people at the funeral, but Damian still is talking to the cat, and he's like, okay, you want to tell me what's up, man? What's going on? Also, Bruce is doing better as well. So, once again, the cat says, like, I don't know. I have no idea why I talk. And you're the only one that I've talked to, so it might all just be in your head. Who knows? So, Damian basically says, like, yeah, maybe I do need to talk to my dad and get some help from him. This might be a bit over my head. So he goes out of the cave up to the manor, goes up to where his father's being kept. Turns out Bruce Wayne is gone. And in his bed is a Joker card. And he's like, oh, crap. I got to deal with this now. So I don't know how he knows where to go, but he goes down to the same dock that exploded before. And as he makes his way across, he finds a bloody bandage. And he's like, okay, it's a lot of heavy blood loss, but don't want to overreact here. I'm sure my dad is fine. So he sees an open door to a warehouse. He's like, nah, I'm not falling for that. He goes in through the roof. And as he peers through a hole in the flooring of the floor above, he sees his dad strapped to one of the pillars of this warehouse. And as soon as he sees that, he just busts his way down. He's just like, no, I'm not losing him too. So he goes down to free his dad. All of a sudden, the lights kick on. And standing there is Joker. But he makes very clear immediately, like, what? No, I'm not Joker. That guy disappeared like a decade ago. No one knows what happened to him. You can call me Joker. And yeah, he's just dressed the same as Joker, but it's a different guy. And he basically has taken Bruce Wayne hostage here because he's like, yeah, I mean, who better to draw a Batman than Bruce Wayne? The two are always inextricably linked. So, yeah. Joker's back, but not actually Joker. It's a different Joker. So, I gotta tell you, if Andy Kubert was going for the Morrison feel, I'm getting there because there's a lot that they're just not explaining and a lot that I just don't get. Why is the cat talking like Alfred? What did the Jackanapes plot have to do with anything? Why is there a non-Joker Joker? It's a lot. In general, I'd say this one is probably like a 7 flat. I don't think it's because it's out of continuity, but I'm just not like into Damian's Batman. Like, it's an okay story being told, but it just doesn't have that thing that's grabbing me, really. Maybe it is because it feels consequence free, like none of this is actually happening, but I don't know. I feel like there's just something it could have done to really make me feel like this matters, and it just never did that. So I'll give it a 7, and we'll see next issue's the last issue, how it wraps up there. Talon number 14, written by James Tynion IV, art by Emanuel, Simeoni. So last issue we had Calvin being given the Talon death poison thing, and then Casey showed up with her ragtag group of everyone else. So as Calvin is laying on the ground dying, he's like, all right, this sucks. I don't like this, but you know what? I remember the time where I thought I was going to die before, and I fought against it. I'm going to fight against it now. So he gets up and rejoins the fight, even though he is dying on the inside. We see Casey is going one-on-one with the Butcher. She gets tossed aside, and as Calvin gets to his feet, he sees Sarah standing there. It's just like, hey, little Sarah, don't worry. We're going to get you and your mom to safety. And she's like, I don't need saving. So she pulls out a knife and slits Calvin's throat, to which Sebastian shows up just being like, oh, hey, man, Did Sarah just like stab you in the throat? Isn't she great? I love the brainwashing we did with her. Anyway, we didn't poison you enough to kill you, but it did make it so that you can't heal anymore. So you're definitely going to die by the end of this. Anyway, I'm going to take Sarah. Peace. And they just walk off. So at that point, the Butcher grabs Calvin and it's just like, oh, I've been waiting for this for so long. I'm going to do unspeakable things to you and all your little friends here. But Casey is standing behind with a laser cannon for an arm, and she just blows off the Butcher's arm and just like, hey, man, let's make this a fair fight. One arm versus one arm. You think you can take that? So at that point, she uses her laser cannon to just dismember Felix. Just chops him in half, cuts off his legs, and then cuts off his head. And he's just like, there's no killing me. I am the thing that never dies. And she's like, shut up. So his head's off. Casey sees that Calvin's throat was slit, and she's like, okay, hold on. I think I had like a healing function in this arm too. So she does her best to heal Calvin. And as they stand up, they show that they are still surrounded by other Talons. And just like, okay, Casey, you need to go get to the bomb, because if you remember, there's a bomb in this place as well. You need to get to the bomb, shut it down. I'll take care of the rest of these guys. But first, I need you to set me on fire. And she's like, what? Why would I set you on fire? Just like, well, I've got a cryo bomb, and I need to be able to survive that because it's going to flash freeze everyone else. So set me on fire. So he gets set on fire. He sets off the cryo bomb as everyone else bails, freezes all the other Talons. Meanwhile, he is just like, imagine Two-Face, but it's just the same burned half on both sides. And he's like, all right, time to end this. So they go off onto the roof of the Orchard Hotel. Sebastian and Sarah are there, and they talk over an iPad to the rest of the Court of Owls. And the court's just like, dude, what do you think you're doing, man? And he's just like, oh, I'm taking back everything that you took away from me. I'm the one who brought back the Talons. I made the Court of Owls what it is, from a fairy tale into this empire it is today. You think you're going to kick me out? Screw you. And so Calvin, still burned, comes up behind to be like, hey, Sebastian, I'm going to kick your ass. So at that point, Casey runs in. Sorry, not Casey. Sarah runs in, trying to stab him again. And she's like, all right, I'm not dealing with you, kid. Tranks her, just takes her out for a little bit. And then he just, like, I cannot describe how terrifying his face is, goes over and just starts beating the ever-loving crap out of Sebastian. And he's just like, oh, you think it's going to matter? This building's going to explode in just a few minutes and take half the city with it. If we'll both die here and I'll still win. That's how this is going to work. And then the Court of Owls, still listening on the iPad, is just like, hey, we are the Court of Owls. Like, we'll be fine with the other half of the city still standing. No big deal. You're not doing anything to us. So at that point, the police show up, and Calvin's like, no, get away. The whole building's about to explode. But then Batman shows up with the rest of the crew, and he's like, hey, we already took care of the bomb. Don't worry about it. Like, I told you not to go in alone. That was the one thing I told you to do, and we will discuss that later. But meanwhile, let's take care of what's left here. So Casey Sarah still not somehow down from the trank, gets up trying to attack Batman, and Batman just takes her out, hands her over to Sarah, or Casey. I don't know why I messed this up. Casey, who then actually tranks her and just be like, okay, well, we'll deal with your brainwashing soon, baby. So Batman goes over and punches out Sebastian officially as Talon's like, cool, we did it. I gotta die now. And so he just starts falling over, and Casey's immediately like, okay, hey, we gotta fix this. Batman, help? So Calvin fades off. He's pretty much dead, but we cut to 3 weeks later. We're on Securitas Island, and Calvin is waking up from a healing pod. And Casey walks in just like, hey, guess who's in charge of Securitas Island now? So he puts on his clothes, and they just talk and just like, yeah, no, everything's being worked out. We're doing what we can. They share a nice little tender moment of a kiss. And they say, all right, so here's what's going on. The Court of Owls back in hiding. Sebastian in jail. He's not getting out of Blackgate. The Butcher actually managed to start like reassembling himself from being cut in half. So we put him on super ice, and Batman is locking him up on Securitas Island in like absolute zero room. So he's still around, but he's not something that we have to worry about. Meanwhile, Sarah's still dealing with the brainwashing with Dr. Leslie Tompkins, and she's drawing a picture of the like tomb of the first Talon, which I think we saw in a Villains Month issue. So that'll show up at some point. And as Townsend's just like, okay, but what about Batman? Is he still pissed I went off on my own? And he's just like, oh yeah, no, we got that squared away, but there's a catch to it. So as they enter into a new back room area, Casey's like, hey, you might notice a bunch of new people in here. You're part of Batman Incorporated now. So, yep. Talon's part of Batman Incorporated. Good for him. Very happy. So here's the catch. This is James Tynion's last issue. There are still 3 more issues in the series, but this is where he was just told like, hey, why don't you go ahead and hop off? And then they gave it to some other people to wrap up the last 3 issues with, which I have spoken to the man. He was not happy with. That was kind of a little kick in the nards for him. So very sorry about that, but I do think it was wrapped up very nicely, except for the fact that like he's is horrifically burned and horrifying to look at for the back half of this issue. Like, I get it. It makes sense from a narrative standpoint of like why it happened, but like the art really went the extra mile in making that just unsettling to look at the whole time. Beyond all that, I'd say it's a great final issue. I don't really care about it being part of Batman Incorporated, but that's mainly because DC doesn't really do much with Batman Incorporated from now on. So all in all, I'd say this is probably I'll say a flat 7. I enjoy Talon. I think it's a interesting series, and because there's no expectations of the character, they can do whatever they want with it. And I think they did. I think they explored a pretty good little area of what could be going on within this Court of Owls story. So 7 for this, and we'll see what those last 3 issues hold just to wrap things up. Superman number 26, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Ken Lashley. What happened last time? Who the hell knows? Frankly, it doesn't matter. So we pick up in Metropolis. Clark is having a nice dinner/lunch with Wonder Woman. And she's like, hey, look, I can't stay for dessert or whatnot, as much as I'd love to, and I'd love for you to tempt me to stay. But like, I got stuff to do, superhero stuff. I've got to fight a demon horde. And as they go in to kiss each other goodbye, Wonder Woman says like, oh, Lois is here. And she starts to walk off. And we see Lois Lane still has psychic powers from the end of War. She's still in a coma in the hospital, and she's using an astral projection version of herself to show up in Superman's apartment because she also knows that Clark Kent is Superman. Get all that? So she shows up here. Wonder Woman steps off and just being like the art says that she's upset and angry, but like the words say like, hey, don't worry about it. It's all cool. I'll let you guys talk for a minute. So at that point, Wonder Woman goes off to like the bedroom or whatever just to clean up. And Lois is like, hey, look, I'm sorry to drop in on you, but like, I'm having a problem that because of my psychic powers, I can like see and hear everything around me, like everyone's thoughts and whatnot. And it's becoming a little bit like overwhelming and driving me crazy. And since I know you're Superman and you have super hearing and whatnot, how the hell do I handle this? And he's just like, oh, hey, it's going to be all right, Lois, I promise. So he puts on his Superman gear, goes, talks to Wonder Woman, just being like, hey, I gotta take Lois back to the hospital. Are you good to see yourself out? And she's like, yeah, totally. He's like, are we cool? Are you upset with me? She's like, no, I'm not. You're Superman. Like, you're awesome. Don't worry about it. He's like, oh, great. Awesome. Cool. See ya. So we go to Suicide Slum in Metropolis, and some old lady is being loaded up onto a gurney, and jumping in the back before they shut the door is Parasite, who's looking for a fix. So we show Superman carrying the astral projection of Lois across the city. And she's like, I'm an astral projection, right? I can just fly. And he's like, right, yeah, force of habit. Do you want me to like let you go? And she's like, no, I'm good with this. So fly back to the hospital, and then she's like, oh geez, I can't believe he's here. And they both like look outside the window into her room, and it's General Lane. And if you remember, one of the psychic people that gave Lois her power was a senator. And it turns out Sam Lane has been contacted by whoever the hell to essentially take over the senator spot temporarily until another election can be held. And he's just like, oh, you always made me proud, Lois. I just needed to tell you first. All right, so that's a thing. So he walks off. Clark then enters in his Clark persona and continues talking to Lois. And Lois is like, hey, my father's scared. I don't know why. He's never been scared of anything. And he's just like, well, his daughter is currently in a coma. I think that's like something to be scared about. And he's just like, maybe we'll see. And so at this point, Clark puts forward like, hey, you know my secret identity. Are you going to tell someone about that? And she's like, you mean the moment I get out of this coma, am I going to publish it in the Daily Planet? Yup, that's definitely going to happen. And he's like, great, cool, awesome. So at that point, John Carroll enters the room. If you don't know John Carroll, that is Lois's boyfriend at this moment. And he's super like upset because like she woke up for like a second and the only thing she said was Superman. Am I not good enough for her? And Clark's like, nah, dude, you're great. She chose you. Like, take that to heart. She could have had Superman, but she didn't. She chose you. You're good enough. And so he is so happy about that. And then he sits back down with her. So at this point, we see Parasite has made his way into the hospital, and he's just draining a bunch of patients, but he's like, oh, something's stronger in here. Something's drawing me to it. I got to head in here. So we see Clark is publishing his story on ClarkCatropolis.com. Still the dumbest thing I've ever heard, about Lane becoming a senator. And he's like, oh, well, I hope this is, I have to somehow separate my life as Superman and my life as Clark. And now that I'm my own boss, I don't know if I can do that. We then see Parasite is still feeding off of like corpses and stuff down in the basement of the hospital. But he's like, oh, wait, hold on. I feel it. The power source is like right above me. So for some reason, Dr. Shea Veritas in hologram form shows up on the roof of the Daily Planet. Superman's like, hey, what do you want? How's Lois? And Veritas is like, I don't know. She's not healing. She's transforming into something else. I don't know what. And then immediately Superman hears the Parasite attack going on. He's like, oh, I got to go. And Veritas is like, don't worry about it. I'm barely in the story. So whole hospital's running scared because Parasite's attacking, and he's just like, all right, I'm getting this rush. It's the first time I felt a rush like this since Superman. Like, something big is in here. So he's going up trying to get to this power source. Meanwhile, Superman like grabs the elevator as Parasite's inside of it and just pushes it out of the building. And he's like, hey, Parasite, what in the hell are you doing here? And he's just like, I've got something I'm looking for in this building. So he manages to use ice powers on Superman. I don't know where those came from, but he freezes Superman enough that he's able to push the elevator back down to Earth. Superman is stuck inside, and Parasite goes up to Lois Lane's room and says, this is it. This is the power. Lois Lane means everything to me. So I'm putting like $90 on the fact that Parasite's going to drain out the memory that Clark is Superman. That's my money. That's what I'm doing. I'm not paying it to anybody though. So all in all, I mean, who cares? I was so done with the Psywar story. The fact that we went over to a Krypton Returns storyline and now are coming back to the consequences of Psywar. I'm just, at least it's a little bit on its own. It's doing its own thing, but we keep on bringing up stuff like Clark Catropolis, and it's just, I'm done with this run. I'm just done with this run. I don't want to do anything related to any of this. The status quo is stupid, and I don't like it. So overall, I'm going to say this is a 5. It's just boring to me. It's not a bad issue. I just don't care. I can't bring myself to care. So 5 sounds fair to me, but I'm a little bit biased. Superman Unchained number 5, written by Scott Snyder, art by Jim Lee and Dustin Nguyen. This is one of the first issues that has Dustin Nguyen's epilogues just throughout, and they are young Clark and Lana in Smallville, and they are, it's a day in the middle of summer. They are up on top of old man Barton's, I think. No, someone else. I don't know. Some old man's grain silo, and they're going to jump off into a big pile of hay nearby. But as they are going to do so, Lana slips and Clark has to save her, and as such, this is the first time that he flies in order to keep her from falling to the ground. And it's just like, oh my god, I don't even understand what's happening. So cut to now, Nova Scotia. Wraith and Superman are looking for traces of Lois Lane, but they can't find her anywhere. Can't hear her heartbeat, can't sense her anywhere at all. And Wraith points out, like, wait, hold on, I have something. It's in, like, this very specific wavelength of your vision. Check it out. And so they see it and say, oh, it must be Ascension tech. That's important. So Wraith says, let's go back to the machine and we can deal with it there. And Superman's like, no. We're going back to my place in order to deal with this. So Lois last issue got kidnapped by the Ascension, and this is just them saying their plan. They say, hey, Lois, we're not actually family. I said you were a sister last issue, but no, turns out what I meant was that we are children of the machine, and your father is currently in charge of the machine. And Lois is like, what in the hell is the machine? So the explanation is that when Wraith first arrived on the planet, they call him just an alien, his ship held something that was like an equation that taught people how to do things with crystals, which essentially fast-forwarded all sort of tech chain supply stuff. So like transistors and stuff like that were all based off of this machine's equation. And the guy leading Ascension, his name is Jonathan Rudolph, and his grandfather William was the very first leader of the machine. So at that point, Lois is like, okay, so what's the big deal? You learned all this from your grandfather? He had regrets or something like that? What's going on? And he's just like, yeah, totally. But here's the thing that we have special. And he opens up the door and they show a big glowing stone crystal thing inside that he calls the Earth Stone. And it turns out that anything that was made via the equation can be controlled via this Earth Stone. So what they're going to do, and their whole plan, is to take it back to before the machine and say, okay, humanity was guided by alien principles for a while there. We're just going to undo all that and make it so that humanity can figure out its own way, which means pretty much all tech post-1938 is just going bye-bye. So we get another flashback here of Clark trying to figure out how to fly again, and he keeps on like jumping up and just like nothing's working out. And when he comes back home, he sees the old man who ran the farm, Mr. Colder, has a shotgun aimed at his mom. And Colder's like, well, hey there, Clark, you were on my property earlier, you and that girl. So cut back to now in the Fortress of Solitude. Wraith is like, you have so many weapons here, man. It's like all this technology. Why didn't you hand it over? And like Superman finishes his thoughts like, to the military? Because that seems like a stupid idea. And Wraith is like, I meant your country. Like, don't you have any pride or anything like that? And he's like, no country should have all access to this. And he's like, hey, look, I'm sure you have access to distant planets. Can you pull up this very specific planet in this galaxy? And he pulls it up, and Clark's like, is this your planet? He's like, yep. I will never see it again. It is too far away. But I'm part of an old race, even older than Kryptonians, and our priority is spreading knowledge and peace throughout the universe. That's a thing. And Superman's like, dude, I don't get you. Why are you so star-spangled up your ass with America? And he's like, look, with a country, like, your parents chose to have you land here, right? Don't you think that was for a purpose? Don't you think they wanted you to maybe instill its ideals and values inside of you? And he's just like, yeah, but like I do that, just not as like patriotically as you do. I'm doing it my own way. And he's just like, look, right now, Superman, you are stuck in between where you want to be a human, but you also want to be Superman. And you just, one of those has to give way. And it's going to be the human part. Like, that's going to be the problem. And he's like, oh, okay, well, agree to disagree. And he's like, no. Okay, look, let's run a little role play here. I want you to picture yourself at work today. Imagine all your coworkers around you. Now, fast forward 10 years. All your coworkers are older, but you haven't changed. But maybe like you go through the effort and you put on makeup and stuff to make it look like you're older. Okay, 40 years ahead now. Some of your coworkers are dead, and you still have to keep on putting on the act that you're older and older and older. Another 40 years. It's now 80 years in the future. Everyone that you know is dead. Your work is gone, and you are still pretending for what? And Superman's like, I don't want to think about this, so we're not going to talk about this right now. And at that point, Superman's like, okay, but like, let's talk about Ascension. What was going, like, you were one of the bombs that was dropped on Tokyo. I think you might be involved with whatever Ascension's planning. And Wraith is like, yeah, I thought about that too. And then he grabs one of the guns inside the fortress and says, yes, General Lane, I'm in the fortress. You want me to take the weapons and neutralize Superman? Understood. So then we get the last bit of the flashback where Mr. Colder's aiming the gun now at Clark, and he's like, people think I'm crazy that I see stuff, but you were flying, boy, and I'm going to take that to the press. And at that point, Martha pushes the gun out of Colder's hand, or tries to. Colder smacks her in the face with it, and then Clark takes a buckshot straight to the chest. So then we go back to Lois, and Ascension's just like, all right, well, that's our plan. What do you think about it? And she's like, oh, you're crazy. And he's just like, yeah, I figured you would say that. Anyway, nothing's going to stop us now. So Lois tries to break free. She goes after her bag, but Ascension has already taken the crystal out of it and just being like, ah, yes, the person that you met was a geologist who was helping us understand things, but he's gone now and we didn't need him anymore. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing to you, where we're going to fire all of our weapons, and then we are going to burn out your eyes so that you can't bring anybody back to us. So then we go back to Wraith, who, remember, just said, yes, Sam Lane, I will attack Superman. Turns out that was just him playing a hypothetical. He's like, that order could have come through any time, Superman. I might be ordered to do that soon enough, and your whole life will then be placed into question. So, hey, join this larger cause of America. And he's just like, dude, stop stealing my weapons. What are you doing? And then Batman calls up over the line. He's like, hey, Superman, we got a little bit of a problem. And he's like, I'm a little bit busy. What's going on? And it's like, oh, well, Ascension accessed the nuclear warheads and fired off a few. And he's like, what? How many? How much time do we have? And he's just like, well, they already fired literally every single nuke on Earth. So, yeah. And then we get the final page of the flashback where he just keeps taking buckshots to the chest as this farmer just gets crazier and crazier, firing shots at him. So, yeah, that was a lot. I did a poor job of explaining it. It does do a little bit deeper into why Wraith believes that Superman, like, should follow these, like, be more patriotic and be a soldier rather than just being his own free thing. But I also appreciate Superman's rebuttals to all that. My main concern here is the fact that, if I remember correctly, last issue, Lex Luthor was doing a whole thing of, like, Jimmy Olsen being the one who's going to end society. Like, what? I don't know. This felt more like a think piece on Superman than it actually felt like an issue of Superman. But that's neither here nor there. I'd probably give this one... Honestly, I'd probably give it like a 6.5. I don't know. We're now more than halfway through this series, because I think this only goes up to issue 9. It might be 10. But it hasn't grabbed me. There's nothing in here that's been like, oh yeah, this is the thing. This is the anniversary of Superman, the special blowout thing. It doesn't have a lot to it. And I'm kind of disappointed by that. So while it's a good think piece, not a great story, 6.5 for now. Larfleeze number 6, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Scott Kolins. So last issue, it's kind of pretty much the same it has been. Larfleeze was being tortured by the Orange Lantern people that he is enslaved for a while. And it basically picks up right there where he's being analyzed by the Corps, trying to figure out how is he a living power battery, and ultimately they have no idea. So their immediate idea is just like, all right, let's start dissecting him, let's cut him up, let's figure out what's going on. And one of the guys, Raprorp, is just like, okay, or if we do that, we might destroy the only power battery that we have. Like, we don't want to get rid of that, so we have to avoid killing him for now. And immediately everyone's just like, okay, well, maybe this, maybe that. But ultimately it comes down to like, yeah, well, he's a slave. We're going to treat him as a slave and he'll do whatever we have to do. But some people are still not happy with that. They're still just like, no, if we want to recharge the rings, we're going to have to say an oath to him. Like, that is not okay. But as they look down at Larfleeze, who's knocked out, it's like, he still looks so smug, even when he's unconscious. And as they go we see inside of his psyche, has a dream. He's inside of like his cave. All of his stuff is still there. And he's just so happy. But then he hears his mom talking nearby and just like, oh, hey, Mom, what's up? And she's just like, oh, you suck. I hate you so much. And it's just like, oh, no, Mom, please. So then the mom says, all right, shut up and listen, because here's something you need to like understand about yourself now. And she keeps on saying like how he made up his origin, essentially, of he didn't end up freeing the slaves. He was actually the ones who doomed them. She says that she's from Ogatu, and so is he. But then he's just like, no, I'm from Spilkuzian. Like, that's where I'm from. He's like, no, you're not, but whatever. Don't even listen. Like, you may as well be from Trenton for all you know. And he's like, what's a Trenton? And he's like, shut up. So at that point he says, look, you are the master of orange energy, right? And he's like, yes, totally. What does that matter? And she's like, okay, look, you're a living power battery. and you control the orange light. And he's like, yeah, but I don't have a ring. It's like, right. But when you sent out Orange Lantern constructs, did they have rings? And it's like, yeah. It's like, how did they get their rings? It's like, well, they were made out of the orange energy. And you now have the orange energy in you, right? Right. And then like, tick, 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 little light bulb goes off. He's just like, right, I can make their rings. And at that point, he's saying like, yeah, he wakes up in real life and everyone's just like, oh, hey, Larfleeze woke up, ready for some more torturing. And he's like, I am not going to be tortured by you ever again because I am master of the orange light. And he's just like, no, you're our slave. You don't have a way to wield that power. And then immediately all the rings come off of their fingers, go onto his. And he's just like, boy, I'm the one who killed you. I'm the one who brought you back to life in the orange light. And I can take you out again. And he says, yep, all of your rings, your power is mine, all mine. So he's back at full energy. And we will get back to that in a second. But first, what's Stargrave up to? Stargrave and Wanderer are currently making their way across the galaxy to find the Council of Ten, which, if you remember last issue, Wanderer was super upset with, because if they managed to make a decision to follow them to this universe, they can make a decision to do anything, like kill them all, because they are omnipotent, but like very bad at decision making. So at that point, he looks over all of them and says, okay, they have an army that they tend to use, but we wiped out that army before, so it shouldn't be like an issue. But if they start making the army again, then that's going to be a problem. They're going to destroy all living beings in the universe. And so Stargrave's like, okay, what's the plan? And Wanderer's like, I don't have one. I have no idea what to do here. This is a bit much. So at that point, Stargrave says, okay, well, what if we were to enlist ourselves into their army once they decide to make it? And like, that way we would be here at the front lines and we'd be able to like get them from inside. And Wanderer's like, oh my God, that's perfect. That's great. But like, they haven't decided whether or not they're going to make another army yet. I'm sure they will, but like, they might be too late by that point. And he's like, well, why don't we just show up and say reporting for duty? If they're as incompetent as you say they are, maybe they won't remember what they decided. So at that point, Wanderer's like, genius. All right, let's do it. And Stargrave's like, wait, no, what do you mean we? I thought I was talking more you. You do that. I'm just a butler. And he's like, yep, and now you're going to help me. So Wanderer starts giving them some camouflage, and that's going to happen next issue. But back to Larfleeze. Larfleeze just starts killing everyone. And by killing, I don't actually mean killing, but like maiming and torturing and like knocking out. And as he starts going through, Glomulus is just like, hey, Larfleeze, remember in New Guardians, I was like super loyal to you? I can continue to be that. I love you, Larfleeze. And all the other guys are like, you suck, Glomulus. And he's like, yeah, but I'm going to live, dicks. So at that point, Larfleeze is just like, all right, look, I don't want your apologies. I'm still missing one of my rings. Where is it? Who's got it? And then all of a sudden, the cow dude, I forget his name, he shows up and he's like, everyone always forgets about me because I was off in the stable, but now I'm here and I've still got a ring and I'm going to kick your ass. And then Larfleeze just does the same thing where he just takes the ring off his finger and he's like, okay, well, could I interest you in a nice horsey ride? So at that point, Larfleeze, he cracks the ground, huge amounts of energy, and he uses his orange energy to shackle back up all of the Orange Lantern Corps members, and they're just like all trapped. And Larfleeze doesn't care if they surrender, doesn't care what they want, but they specifically say like, look, we're never going to serve you again. You may as well kill us. And he's just like, I don't need any of you. I'm a god. I'm a god of orange light. And you are going to live here on this planet in eternity so that you can remember the time that you served the orange god, and you'll be begging for me to come and save you again. So screw all of you. Now tell me where my ring is. And sorry, there was actually like one more ring. The cow guy didn't have it. It was just another one that he missed. So he's like, I still need to find my ring. And they're just like, dude, you got all these rings. Just summon it. Just say like, hey, ring, come to me. And so the ring was out in the ocean. It comes up, it lands on him, and he's like, yes, now my collection's complete. I am back to being a god. I'm done with all of you. I don't care if you live or die. Goodbye. I'm going to find my butler. And so he flies off. There's a little bit here where it's revealed that Rap Warp is into this one girl, I forget what her name is, and then the girl is into Glomulus, and Glomulus is able to self-procreate, so he's not into anybody. So that's all happening. Regardless, Larfleeze is flying out into space, and he's like, yes, I have a marker on Stargrave, so I'm going to be able to find him no matter where he is. So I'm coming for him, and I'm going to give that Wanderer a taste of my full power. So we see next up is Larfleeze versus Dirge, Dirge versus Errata, Larfleeze versus Errata, Stargrave versus the Council of Ten, and finally Wanderer versus Stargrave. So that's all happening. Honestly, it felt like a really repetitive issue. It felt like there was just the exact same things over and over again of Larfleeze just being like, I've got power now and I'm more strong than any of you. And he just does that for like 17 straight pages. It's fine. It's not great. I definitely don't feel like it should have been the end of a trade. It gives me no incentive to go and read the next one. But hey, what are you going to do? I'm going to say this is I'm going to give it a 6. I don't know. Like, maybe it was because there just was like zero comedy in this one. It was just kind of played straight the whole way through. It just wasn't that great. So yeah, 6 for this. We'll see how it picks up next time. Red Lanterns number 26, written by Charles Soule, art by Jim Calafiore. So last issue, Red Lanterns went to attack an evil dictator named Jen Sui and then got captured because it turns out the people they were masquerading as were still alive. So we have Zilius Ox is currently working on the ship on the planet where they are being held captive. And Zox is like, okay, hey, what do you guys want? And Gardner calls over. He's just like, hey, we've got trouble. Get out of here with the damn ship and we will get out and meet you back on. And then the comms go out and Zox is like, okay, something's going on. What should I do? So we see a fight going on and immediately all the constructs that like Gardner and I'm always blanking on his name, Rancor, are making are falling down because they are being fired upon by all sides. And at that point, it's just like, all right, we need more rage. Do you guys have like an oath or something we can say to get charged up? And Ratchet's like, yeah, with blood and rage of crimson red, ripped from a corpse so freshly dead, together with our hellish hate, will burn you all. That is your fate. And Guy Gardner's like, that is the stupidest, most unraged thing I've ever heard in my life. All right, new oath. We're red, you're dead. Everyone like that? And he's like, yeah, no, that's a lot more snappy. So they go up and start trying to attack. And then all of a sudden, Gensui fires off this special beam at them that wraps them all in this weird energy field, and immediately all of them are just mellowed out. They're all just super calm. And Gensui explains like, yeah, no, it's a neuropacifier. It just like makes everybody who's angry super calm, so no problems there. And as Barg and Gensui come up, there's like, hey, Barg, Gensui, sorry we tried to kill you guys. Hope we're cool, simpatico now. And just like, no, actually, I'm going to go ahead and let Bard kill you, and then we're going to have like a public execution for who's left and whatnot. It's like, cool, right. Totally awesome. So we cut back over to what is Atrocitus up to? And if you remember last issue, there was a giant like kaiju-sized monster that was crashing around the city that got a Red Lantern's ring. And after he destroyed the city, he looked all sad. So Atrocitus went up and he's like, okay, Dexter, are you ready? Let's launch our plan to get this ring back. So Dexter makes a Red Lantern construct, which I thought was limited just to like Rancor and human ones, but guess Dexter can do it too. And he makes a Red Lantern construct of like another of this guy's race. And he's just like, hey, just open him up. Get him to come close. That's all we need. So back on Cormorax, where the Red Lanterns are being held trial, Gensui's basically like, hey, these guys thought they could show up and overpower me, but you guys love your dictator, right? We're not going to let that happen. You see just everyone like sobbing out in the audience that it didn't work out. So it's like, so I am here to teach you exactly what happens if you go against me. And they're still stuck in the field, and it's like, hey, man, this happens. Sure, we died, but, we lived a pretty good life. But Ratchet's the only one who's just like, wait a minute, hold on. No, this isn't right. We shouldn't be doing this, but he's still fighting against the field. So at that point, they have a specific point here where Gensui's essentially double-crossing Barg because why not? He's an evil dictator. And they show that they're going to blow up A.R.G.U.S ship, which still has Zilius on it, because they've traced it outside of orbit, with their Death Star. It's a Dyson Sphere, but it's a Death Star. So they start their laser process. Zox sees it coming, so he's like, all right, time to supercharge this. And he jams his ring into the ship's engine, trying to get it out of the way in time. Doesn't seem like he succeeds. Cut back to Atrocitus. The giant construct is currently hugging the kaiju, and Atrocitus climbs into the kaiju's ear. Dexstar releases the construct, and immediately the beast is pissed off again. But it's too late to do anything about it, as Atrocitus is inside his brain, messing with stuff. So the whole gang looks up to see their ship exploding in the sky, and as they do so, Gensui drops the field long enough for shots to be fired at the group, and Ratchet manages to, just in the nick of time, use his tentacles to block all of the shots, but ends up taking several lethal shots on his own. So the field goes back up while the guards recharge their shots, and everyone's like, "Hey, Ratchet, you cool, man?" And he's like, "Nah, I'm doing all right. Hey, look up there." And as they look up at the explosion, we see Zilius Zox has supercharged A.R.G.U.S ship, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is freaking awesome. It's running off red energy now." So he uses the lasers on board the ship to start firing at the guards. That lets down the field. And immediately everyone goes after Gensui and A.R.G.U.S. So A.R.G.U.S takes off. He just runs because Gensui betrayed him. Meanwhile, Gensui's like, "Hey, execute the Syrian protocol." And Bleach shows up and it's like, "Hey, Gensui, we're here to kill you." And he's like, I just launched a protocol that if anything, or if I don't call it off, all of the children and all of the work camps around the planet will all be murdered. So you better not kill me or else it's not being called off. And she's just like, "Cool, call it off. Or we can keep you alive for a very long time. Call it off." And he's just like, "All right, calling it off." And then immediately she impales him and kills him. So everyone then sees Ratchet, and Ratchet explains like, "Hey guys, look, my whole thing for Rage is that my race didn't like allow me to socialize, and being part of the Red Lanterns let me socialize. So my rage was already kind of fading just by like me being around you. So yeah, I wanted to be able to do something with my friends here at the end. And now I'm pretty much not a Red Lantern anymore because my rage was so faded. But I'm glad we did something together. That was cool." And then Ratchet dies. So they all fly off the planet, head up to Zox, and Zox is like, "Oh my god, did you see how cool it was with that? Oh, hey, what happened to Ratchet?" And it's just like, "Yeah, no, he's dead. Like, that's like, we're going to go and we're going to blow up every single military installation on this planet, and then we're going to go home. So, because I want to make sure Cormorax is completely taken care of." So at this point, we cut over to Atrocitus, who is bursting out of this kaiju's eyeball. The ring comes off of the kaiju's hand and is like searching for a replacement. And then it immediately loops back around and says, "Hey, Atrocitus, you got rage in your heart." And he's like, "Yes, I do." So that's the issue. Atrocitus has his red ring back, and it seems that Guy and them did a pretty good job of taking down an evil dictatorship that threatened his sector. So good job all around, but it only cost Ratchet, which is a loss, but not as bad as like Bleeze or something. So overall, I'm going to say this is a 7.5. I think that it's funny, especially when you get to the point with like the field that causes them to just kind of peace out. I really think their dialogue in there is great. Ratchet's story was actually pretty heartwarming all throughout. It shows like his evolution of a character. I didn't even realize he was having an arc until they kind of pointed it out there. So yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I'm going to give that, I already said, yeah, it's like a, what did I say, 7.5? That still stands. 7.5. Aquaman number 26, written by Jeff Parker, art by Paul Pelletier and Netho Diaz. So pretty much start of a new arc here. We pick up in the northern Atlantic, deep down in the ocean. There is some sort of scientific like research lab or something like that that's trying to pick at this petrified thing down on the ocean floor, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's like thousands of years old. It's totally frozen. There's no way anything alive is left there." And as they start hitting it with a bunch of lasers and stuff like that, wouldn't you know, it starts moving, and it turns out it's actually the mouth of this gigantic beast that immediately sucks up the submarine. So cutting to Amnesty Bay in Maine, we have a man that's going around town, and he's just asking people like, hey, does anybody know Aquaman? Anybody know where I can find him? Anybody know where King of Atlantis is? And everyone's just like, I don't know what you're talking about, kid. What's an Aquaman? Never seen him around here before. I've lived here all my life. So everyone's just sending him around. And he calls up somebody on the phone and is just like, yeah, no luck. Like, everyone here seems to be on his side, despite the fact that Atlanteans attacked. Like, you'd think somebody be willing to sell out Aquaman. So we see where Aquaman is. Him and Mera are currently trying to rescue some Atlantean engineers that are stuck inside of a suddenly appearing lava vent. And Aquaman just comes in, grabs them all. Mera takes a few of them with her water powers and gets them out. And they're just like, hey, what was going on, engineers? And the engineers are like, oh, this vent just suddenly appeared. We had no time to get away from it. It's absolutely insane. And like one of them is just like, oh, thank you, Queen Mera. And she's like, no, I know that none of you like me around here as a Zebellian. Don't get me like, thank you, but don't like pity me. So at that point, Aquaman's like, oh, it's a new thing that formed. Well, we need to get some scientists on that. Mera, when is the next royal meeting? And it's like, actually, it started like 2 hours ago, and I've been telling you about it all week. And he's like, ooh, great. So they go back to Atlantis, and all of the like viziers and like heads of their departments or whatnot are there. And they're just like, all right, so it appears King Arthur is once again not going to show up here, so I guess we will adjourn this meeting until he decides to show up for one of them. And one of them really starts complaining of like, look, I support Aquaman's family. I was all in on Queen Alana, but like, he needs to pay attention to Atlantis more than the surface. Like, that is a problem. So at that point, Aquaman does show up. He walks in and he's like, hey, everyone, can we get scientists onto the lava vent stuff? And I guess whoever's in charge of that department's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And everyone else is like, hey, Aquaman, you're like hours late. Could, some of us got places to be. Can we go or do you want us to stay? He's like, no. You got anyone who has places to be, feel free, go. Don't feel like you're stuck here. Like, I'm the one who was late. Don't worry about it. So everyone starts leaving, except for like one or two leftover people. One of them named Kay, who Mera's like, hey, what were they talking about us while we were there? And Kay's like, well, I don't really think it's my place. And then a woman named Marga steps up being like, actually, they were talking about how you guys spend way too much time focusing on the surface world's problems. And Arthur's like, well, thanks. I guess I'd rather hear it than not. And he's just like, yeah, no, totally. Also, they wish that you would wear your crown more. And he's like, I'm wearing the belt. That's enough. So at that point, red alert starts going off. And we see that the attack is the alerts to keep track of the trench to make sure it doesn't attack the surface world again, but it's coming from Maine, or no, sorry, it's not coming from Maine, and that's what's shocking the most because the trench is off the coast of Maine. It's this giant kaiju thing that was awoken by these scientists. And he's just like, okay, it's like really far away on the coast of Iceland. How are we supposed to get there fast enough? And apparently Arthur and Mera have worked out this pressure launch thing where Mera uses her currents while Arthur does a super swimming to essentially launch out of the ocean into low orbit. So they do that. He gets up in the air, and as he starts coming back down, he sees the kaiju just like tearing apart little yachts and whatnot. And he's just like, hey, are you close enough to see the beast? What's going on? He's like, I'm not close, but yeah, I can see it. It's freaking huge. So this thing looks like, what's it called? Those little like shell creatures, like the isopods or whatever they are. So a bunch of like jets come in, start attacking it, and they're doing nothing to it. It's completely hopeless. But then Arthur comes in literally from low Earth orbit, high speeds, and just cracks the thing down on the top of its head. He's knocked out for a second. When he finally comes to, Mera's speaking to him telepathically, and he's just like, I just hit that thing with like 1,000 pounds of force, and like it did nothing. He is just totally still standing here. So it continues to attack a bunch of boats with people on them. Arthur starts attacking it by like cutting off tentacles and whatnot that it's using. And everyone down in Atlantis is like, hey, royal advisors, get in here. Take a look at this. Anyone know what this is? And they're like, it's the Karakan. And everyone's like, what the hell's a Karakan? And it's like, well, it's a beast that's supposed to be answering to the royal family's like thoughts. But apparently it doesn't see Arthur as royal family. Ain't that something? So at that point, Arthur's still trying to beat it down. the last time he tried controlling like a kaiju-sized thing, and knocked him out for a few weeks. So he knows he shouldn't try to do that. But as the beast starts making landfall and everyone starts running, he's like, all right, guess I got to do that. I don't really have a choice with it. So he starts using his telepathic ability. And Mara is able to contact him as he does so. And she's like, what? Don't tell me you're trying to control that thing. And Arthur's like, Mara, I don't know what's going on. And you see through his eyes, through the beast's eyes, that it looks like ancient Atlantis, but there's like a huge portal in the sky. And he's like, I'm tripping balls, Mara. So, yeah. Good first issue. I'm not sure. I think Jeff Parker is just the writer on this series from now on. I think it's a nice, like, it doesn't have to do this huge thing. It's kind of the same way Jeff Johns started his run. It was just like, there are beasts that attack and we don't know their origins. They're mysterious and we're just going to go with a smaller scale story here. I think that's a great way for Jeff Parker to start this, where it's this idea of, okay, we're at a new status quo. He is king of Atlantis still, but like, what does that mean? How does that change things? But it still goes with this smaller scale story of just this big monster showed up and Aquaman has to fight it off. So all in all, I think it's like a solid 8. I'm into it. I'm hoping for the best. We'll see what happens over the course of the arc, but it's done enough to draw me in, which is half the battle. The Flash number 26, written by Christos N. Gage, art by Neil Googe. This is essentially just a one-and-done story. And we have Flash chasing after a woman firing off a machine gun. We get her name later on. I think it's like Sky Pirate or something like that. We'll get to it. Anyway, she is firing off a thing and she's in the back of a plane. And Flash is just saying, like, look, I'm the fastest man alive. I can chase after people all day, but I do have my limitations. For instance, I can't fly. So as she's getting airborne, I realize I need to catch up like right now, or else I'm going to have to call in like other members of the Justice League. So as the plane is taking off, Barry does a solid leap, like jumps after the plane. Meanwhile, this lady fires, sorry, her name is Spitfire. That's it. Spitfire starts firing off the machine gun at Barry, so he has to vibrate in order not to get hit by the bullets. But because he's vibrating, he can't grab hold of the plane, so he ends up just falling down as the plane manages to take off. So police come up and they're like, oh, geez, Flash, what do you want to do? And he's just like, look, I'll call up the Justice League. I'll see if I can get somebody. Like, I wanted to deal with this personally because I am personally invested in catching her, but like, I'll call up the Justice League. I'll get someone else to take care of it. And then he calls up and he's like, okay, well, they're all dealing with something going on in like low Earth orbit. So the flyers are going to be busy. Could you call up an Air Force base and see if they have any planes available to take off like right now? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So then Flash runs off there and they say like, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to do my best. So we cut back to why this is personal. Not very long ago, there's a scientist who works with a bunch of deadly diseases, anthrax, smallpox, you name it sort of stuff. And he is in his lab. It's completely sealed off, but he has been infected with like all of his diseases. And Barry was called in as the like CSI guy to see what was going on. And they say like, it looks like he just bumped into a shelf, but like, we can't let you in there. You're going to have to do all your examining from outside. But it turns out this guy was actually one of Barry's like mentors and heroes as a forensic scientist. So Barry's a little bit too personally connected. So he's like, look, I'm going to call in Patty. She'll help me out, but like, I'm definitely going to be a part of this as well. So they do some investigation and they're like, look, yes, he might have fallen backward into the shelf. It's honestly a bit too hard to tell, but like, not everyone is as lucky with lab accidents as you are, Barry. Like, you got pretty lucky there. So they go outside and they notice that there's a dirt road that has tire tracks like peeling out through it that don't match any of the tires for the cars nearby. And it's like, that's suspicious. Let's see if we can follow them. And they specifically call up saying like, oh, well, looks like the marks that they led to is from a helicopter landing gear. And it's like, oh, well, a helicopter wouldn't require normal flight plans. So, yeah, no, this is super suspicious. So he flash gears up and he manages to get some information that leads him to Spitfire, who is already in the Justice League database because she is a, like, pirate of the skies and she likes her guns. So at that point, we see her next thing that she's up to, which is kind of where we open the story, is she's in this plane. She uses the plane she's in to attack a helicopter that has all of these, like a bunch of deadly diseases and stuff in them. And as they're in there, it's like, what do you mean you're attacking us? Don't you know what we have in here? And it's like, yeah, totally. Ricin, Joker serum, the bubonic plague. I want it all, and I'm going to sell them to the highest bidder. So she jumps out of the helicopter with the gear. They manage to take it down. And then she flies back over to her own plane. But as she gets over there, they see an Air Force jet coming up. So they fire missiles at it, immediately taking it out. But the canopy opens and out comes the Flash, who literally runs on the clouds in order to keep up with the plane. And they're just like, okay, that's insane, but climb higher. We don't want to deal with him. But Flash uses the helicopter as it's still falling out of the sky to jump off of it and land on the plane, phasing through it. So at that point, he turns to Spitfire to be like, it's over. I'm Justice League. I'm totally like, you're not going to be able to sell those drugs. And she's like, you're right, I'm not. And she just throws them out the window so that Barry has to stop them before they crash to the ground. So Barry does a skydiving routine. He says he practices this regularly with Green Lantern on standby, but like that doesn't make it any more any less terrifying when he has to do it for real. So he grabs all the tubes. He uses his like vortex arm spinning power to land safely. And he's like, great, awesome. Still got to take care of this though. So he runs the vials over into the police department, spends just long enough to explain like, yep, these are super deadly. Don't spill them. I'll be right back. And then heads back out again. Now, mind you, he did do some serious damage to the plane because people were firing their guns inside of a plane. So it starts falling out of the sky. Spitfire just jumps out the back of it while all the rest of her crew is left inside to basically die. And in case they weren't going to, she shoots them anyway. So the plane starts crashing like right into Chicago, because they're in Chicago for some reason. And as she looks out, she's got her little glider on. She sees the flash streak going to the top of Chicago's like buildings and using his wind turbine powers to keep the plane afloat so that it lands in the middle of Chicago's Wrigley Stadium. And just like, great, perfect, everything's safe, no problem. So we see finally that, eventually Spitfire has to land. She lands in the river, and she's like, all right, I still have a chance if I can get out of here. And then she immediately looks up, sees Flash running to her, and she's like, all right, fine, whatever, I give. So at that point, Flash is like, why? You gave me such a hassle there, and you just gave up at the end. Why? And just like, if I couldn't outpace you in the sky, there was no way I was going to outpace you on the ground. From what I can tell, there's nowhere you can't go. And Flash is like, yeah. So I think it's a nice little one and done. It's a cute little story. Christos is not the writer for all of everything moving forward. We do have Brian Buccellato coming up for a few issues here, but like, I think it was a good story. It was just a nice little thing. And it's basically just like, it's the Aquaman story. It's the sort of story of like, Aquaman's good in the ocean, but he's not good anywhere else. And you like have to write a story to show that he's capable regardless. This is that same thing where it's like, Flash is good as long as he has something to run on. But what happens when he's in midair? He's useless. And it's showing, no, he does have a skill set that's useful regardless of where he goes. So all in all, nice little story. I'd probably give it like 8. It's good. It's a one and done. Like, you don't have to read anything else to get it. It's just its own thing. So yeah, I liked it. Cool. All-Star Western number 26, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jeff Johnson and Moritat. So last issue, they met up with Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing got infected by some sort of parasite, and yeah, this issue, we pick up back in the Old West, and we see a bunch of lawmen, or possibly bandits, are attacking a church, and they come in, they're after the preacher, but as they go inside, they see someone kneeling over the preacher's body saying, I got dibs as a bounty hunter, you all have to go. And it's like, oh, screw you, we're going to take it from you anyway. And there's a lot of shooting, a lot of blood, and we find out it's Tallulah Black, who has fully pregnant, like definitely pregnant, and is dragging the priest's body out through the town and says, hey, could any of you young men help me out, help out a pregnant woman lifting up this body into my wagon? And so they do so, and they say, oh, what are you going to do now, Tallulah? And she's like, I'm going off to get married. Not that it's any of your business. So then we cut to the saloon where Jonah Hex is talking to the bartender, and they're like verbally sparring with each other, just saying like how much they hate each other. But the bartender straight up says like, look, you're getting married. Like, good on you, whatever, but you better get going or you're going to miss your wedding. So he downs his drink, says, go to hell, and heads out. And as he hops on the train, someone chastises him for drinking in public. So he just smashes the bottle on the guy's face, throws him off the train, and steals his seat. So as Jonah arrives in town, we see the priest from earlier is actually alive. It seemed that Tallulah was just kidnapping him for this specific thing. And Jonah is invited into a nearby chapel where immediately things start getting stormy and scary looking. Everyone inside is dressed with like Dia de los Muertos, like skull faces. And the priest is now not the priest, but is an angel that is doing the officiating. And apparently this is a wedding of the damned. And she starts the officiation, and she's like, all right, if everyone's got anything to say, speak up now or forever hold your peace. And as nobody speaks up, she pulls out 2 guns, aims them at Tallulah and Jonah. They then aim their guns at the angel and each other. And they say, all right, well, by the power invested in me, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then they all start shooting at each other. And it seems that Tallulah and Jonah have killed everybody inside the church. To which Jonah turns to her and says, what now? And Tallulah's like, well, now we get our happily ever after. And then Jonah's like, thought so. He shoots Tallulah and says, yeah, this ain't right. This is like a twisted dream or something. I don't like it. So then we cut back to what is actually happening. And it turns out it's a Black Mercy story. For those of you who don't know, Black Mercy is a flower that was introduced from an alien homeworld that was first seen in like a Superman story. It's here, and it has infected Jonah, but he wakes up from it. He tears it off his chest. He looks over at Gina, his girlfriend, and gets it off of her as well. And she's like, oh, geez, I was having such a weird dream. Oh, it was freaky. And he's just like, yeah, totally. Hey, what do we do about Swamp Thing? And we see Swamp Thing still just standing there, fully infected by the Black Mercy. And he's like, all right, we're going to have to get Constantine on this. Like, get him back here. So Constantine shows up, and he's like, look, that's an outer space parasite or something like that. I don't really do magic with parasite or alien stuff. That's like not my bag, but I can do something to help him if you guys are going to be cool about it. And he's just like, yeah, I guess, sure, go with it. So then Constantine just kicks Swamp Thing like through the chest and starts stomping on his corpse over and over again. And it's like, I always say, don't do alien stuff, but does he listen? No, of course not. And immediately Jonah's pissed off because Swamp Thing was like the one hope to find the House of Secrets, whichever house it was, that was going to be able to send them back through time. And so he pulls out his gun on Constantine, and he's like, whoa, hey, you don't think I just did this stuff without thinking, right? And we see that Swamp Thing manages to create a new body. He's now free of the Black Mercy. And he's like, yeah, I'm good, I'm free. No idea what that was, though. That was totally crazy. I'm totally lost there. So at that point, Swamp Thing's like, yeah, okay, anyway, you should go to Metropolis. The house is there. It'll be the one that can get you home. And so Jonah grabs Gina, and they both head off. And Swamp Thing and Constantine are left being like, Jesus Christ, man. Jonah Hex, he's a trip and a half. So as they're stomping off, Gina kind of gets up in Jonah's face and just being like, hey, don't ignore me. Me and you are a team. And he's just like, no, we're not. We're not a team. I sleep with you and I drink with you. That's like all we are to each other. And she's just like, oh, come on, you'd be screwed without me. You know how it is. So Gina basically calls him out on his crap and just be like, oh, yeah, I don't let men walk all over me or treat me like garbage. And Jonah looks back, and they just start making out hot and heavy. They go back to the Burning Man festival, toss some people out of their tent, and says, hey, I'm only going to need this for an hour or so. So come back later. So that was just a thing. So we arrived 1 week later, them in Metropolis. And wouldn't you know it that Jonah rides into town just while a bank robbery is happening. And he sees a bunch of guys holding guns. Jonah draws his own gun. They start firing at each other, but none of the bullets land because of a red and blue blur. Superman comes in and he's like, hello, sir. You should be more careful with your firearms. And Jonah's like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. So Jonah Hex v Superman. Dawn of Justice. That's what's happened next. Maybe it's because I know what Black Mercy is and I saw it last issue and I knew what it was, but those first 12 pages or so where we get the whole Tallulah Black marriage thing, I don't know, I felt like it was kind of just padding. I felt like there just wasn't enough to the story, and they were like, oh yeah, no, here's this thing going on. Like, this isn't an Nocenti book. It's not a point where I think that all of a sudden the story's just going to randomly pop up in some other place in time that doesn't make any sense with what we saw last issue. Like, clearly that stuff at the beginning was not actually reality. I feel like that's the tear. That's the point where you got to make the point and say, like, okay, but they need to believe it's reality. And I never really got the feeling that Jonah ever believed it. It was all just a dream for him, you know? We need that moment where he believes it and then it's like taken away from him. But Jonah's just so cool that he never even has to care about that stuff. Beyond all that, I mean, it's a fine issue. It's just not a whole lot happening. I'm going to say it's 6.5. Like, I don't know. It just wasn't doing it for me. But it was a good issue overall. Like, there wasn't anything super wrong with it. It's just my personal taste. I didn't really get that much out of it. It seemed more like a padding issue than anything else. Teen Titans number 26, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Tyler Kirkham and Scott McDaniels. So last time, Kid Flash was taken into custody or whatever. Honestly, most of it wrapped up in Superboy earlier this month. It's a whole thing, but we're just getting the origin story of Kid Flash. Who the hell is he? Why should we care? So we see his memories being unfolded visually before us of he was a child. His parents were part of a very religious sect on his home planet because he is an alien. And this government force hired these mercenaries called the Functionary to essentially take out these converts, all of these like super religious people. So they start getting attacked and the mother and father die right in front of Kid Flash's face. His name is Bar-Tor, by the way. I'm going to keep calling him Kid Flash. So Kid Flash like goes through the crawl space in the house, and turns out that he's not the only child. There's also a baby sister that he has. And I can't remember the sister's name right now, but we'll get to it. And they show that the house is being basically burned down by the functionaries. All of the neighbors in the area are being interrogated and attacked as well. So Bar-Tor makes his way out of the building and just starts running. He just bails out of the whole town. Sister's name is Shira, by the way. So we cut to modern day, and Kid Flash's eyes are like pried open as his memories are being shown before him. And the narrator's saying like, yep, this is his story. This is everything going on and how he became the most dangerous, feared reactionary in this corner of the universe. And all of his fellow Teen Titans are like, oh my God, this is so grimdark. I can't believe it. So they show his childhood continuing and being like, yeah, he begged, he stole when he had to, he did whatever. But everyone calls out the government people like, no, you went around killing people based off their religious preferences. That's so messed up. And it's like, look, we didn't say the government was perfect, but that was like a long time ago for us. Okay. That was not a good time in our history, but we dealt with that. That's already taken care of. Now it's on what did Bar-Tor do during his period here. So we see that one time he gets caught up in like a little bit of a raid thing while he was trying to steal from a store. And while he's being held at gunpoint, creepy store owner goes and starts like making moves towards his baby sister, to which immediately he's like, don't do it, I'm warning you. And he manages to escape the grasp of his captors, takes a shard of glass and just shoves it into this guy's neck, killing him. So we see as he gets older, he keeps on stealing. He keeps on doing what he has to stay in front of the cops. And he's barely got like a little bounty on his head. Like it's like 5 credits. It's barely anything because he is just a kid. And so finally he's like, look, this life isn't good for my sister. I need to drop her off somewhere. So he goes to the essentially like a nunnery, but for the religion of his parents. And he's like, look, please take care of her. She needs to grow up safe. So drops off the sister and leaves her there. And he hates that he did it, but like he had to. So at this point he goes out and he realizes he needs like some steady work in order to live, basically. So he goes to a functionary. He goes to a place where these mercenaries are, and he's like, look, I want to be one of you. I want to run cargo and whatnot, because they not only are these mercenaries, they have to work like supply jobs and stuff like that in order to make rent. And he's just like, all right, fine. We use kids to fly our most precious cargo and stuff like that because you're smaller, you can get it there faster. So you go ahead and take this. We seal you into the ship so that way you can't just bail out. You have to be bailed out at the delivery point by someone who's waiting for you. So he makes these super dangerous trips and he has no care for his own life. And as such, he's able to get there faster than like anyone else. And he does trip after trip after trip until finally one day it catches up with him. He crash lands on an asteroid and he seemingly is killed, except he's not. He wakes up on this asteroid and like he's super healing and he realizes he has super speed and he's like, oh, it must have something to do with the radiation around here. Anyway, whatever. So he bides his time and a month later, the functionary come and pick up their ship and they're like, what about the boy's corpse? Like, it's not here. And it's like, screw it. It's probably just taken away for something else. Anyway, let's get in the teleporter. So as they're teleporting up, Kid Flash runs into the teleporter beam and immediately just starts wrecking shop. Just starts killing not killing, but starts really punishing all of the functionary up there. And now that he has his powers, he goes back down to the place where he was originally meeting up with his fellow functionary people, and he just destroys it. Like, he absolutely annihilates it, but everyone on the planet hated them anyway, so they're cheering him on. He's a redeemer, he's a savior. So he's able to build up like a resistance, a big group of like anti-government terrorists basically to attack these people. And everyone's like, you're the greatest, Bart. And he's like, no, you're the greatest. Teamwork makes the dream work. So they managed to take some ships to Sty, like full-on wars start breaking out. It's a whole thing until finally, one day on the battlefield, he sees his sister is almost killed by his team of terrorists. And that's because she was raised in the system. So therefore, she didn't know about like the fight and all that and which side she should be on. So she was sent out as a soldier of the government. And as soon as he saw that he almost killed his sister, he's like, all right, I'm out. I quit. I don't want any part of this anymore. So he surrenders to the government and says, I will tell you all of the secrets of the resistance so long as I don't gotta, like, I won't be killed or whatnot. And so they put him in witness protection, which is just sending him back in time with amnesia. And so he shows up there and he becomes Bartor. And Kid Flash, in his own like narration, says like, yeah, but then like I came back and without all my baggage holding me down, I became a hero. And I felt like I could make up for everything I ever did before, even if it was subconsciously. So you guys know me, like I'm a cool dude. I'm not a murderer anymore, right? We're cool. And all the Teen Titans like, ooh, that's kind of difficult, but we'll pick up on that next issue. So that'll probably be in Superboy. Might be in this one, though. I mean, it's an origin story. It's not bad. It's not a bad origin. Honestly, it's kind of lackluster with how long they were building it up, because this has literally been a thing since issue 1 of this series of like, what are Kid Flash's true origins? And it's like, so grimdark. It's so, like, this I feel like is the epitome of New 52 grimdark, where it's like Kid Flash, one of the most hopeful characters in the DC universe. His little protege here, his Kid Flash, is a terrorist who nearly killed his own sister and had to watch his own parents be killed for religious reasons. Like, what? So grimdark. Beyond that, I mean, it's a fine story. It doesn't fall into the normal traps that Scott Lobdell does, so I'm at least grateful for that. I'll probably end up giving this one like 6.5. It's not awful. It's not a terrible issue. It just feels like all of that time we were building up to this, and I'm just kind of disappointed there wasn't something more to it, because it's big, but it's just not 26 issues of build up big. Green Team Teen Trillionaires number 7, written by Franco and Art Baltazar, art by A.R.G.U.S. And last issue, we had JP seeing his lover Cecilia killed by Belichick and then turning into a giant werewolf looking thing. So that's still happening. He's going around just beating up literally everybody in front of him. And Belichick's like, all right, well, that must have something to do with the nanites, but regardless, let's see what we can do with this. So he leans down and picks up Cecilia's helmet and says, hey, This is your girlfriend's. This is her helmet. Do you still smell her in there? Go fetch. And he just throws it over towards where Commodore is. And as soon as JP sees Commodore, he just immediately starts attacking him. So Belichick's like, oh, hey, the creature's going to do all the dirty work. Just make sure to clean up after it's done. So I'm out of here and make sure that nobody ever saw me, including innocent civilians. So at that point, JP is still attacking Commodore. His sister calls out LL saying like, hey, you remember me? I'm your sister. Like, doesn't that count for something? And the like scientist that came with them from the meteor is just like, yeah, no, he's not going to remember you. You probably shouldn't draw attention to yourself right now. So JP starts charging after LL, but he stops like right in front of her. But not wanting her to get in trouble, Mo apparently now has his own special abilities that are like dark lightning powers, and he starts blasting JP, and she's like, what did you do? And he's like, I didn't want you to get hurt. I care about you. And so she and him kiss, and then immediately just like, kids, maybe this is not the time or place when her brother is literally right there watching. So he starts charging again, and he's like, oh, don't worry about it. I got like this suit now. I can feel, I got energy coursing through me. I feel stronger every minute. And LL's like, no, don't hurt my brother. And he's like, oh, what? So then JP launches at Mo and like phases through his body. Like he's not even there. And just like, oh, I had no idea that was one of my powers. So that's cool. So at that point, he gets up still ready to attack. Commodore just throws some stuff at him to take him out for a second. So now it's back to a Commodore v JP fight, and Mo's like, what can I do? How can I help? I don't want to hurt anybody. And JP scratches Mo despite the fact that he's like can be phased through, but like parts of his body kind of fall off of him and then just start wiggling like they're still moving. And he's like, I have no idea what's going on right now. So at that point, JP manages to get like bound up by Commodore because I think he's able to control machines and metal and stuff. So he like wraps some metal around him and says like, hey, look, you have to think about Cecilia. Like, this is not what you would want. And Mo's about to take a shot at him, but then a voice rings out from nearby. And everyone's like, whoa, what was that? And we see JP launch into action, and all of a sudden, phasing out of nowhere comes Cecilia. And he catches her, and she's like, hey, I'm here. And then she starts phasing out. I was like, oh, hold on. And she focuses a little bit, and she's like, there, I'm back. I'm alive. I'm totally good now. And so she starts calming down JP. JP turns back to normal. And he's like, you're alive. And they start making out. So at that point, Cecilia is like, hey, Commodore, I would like to apologize to you. And he's like, don't worry about it. I'm totally over it. I'm glad you're okay. But at that point, Belichick's men start surrounding the green team. And it's like, okay, how do we get out of this one? And it's like, okay, well, hold on. I've got an idea. So Mo's about to start blasting, and he's just like, no. Like, Commodore just calls him out, just says, no, I'm done with fighting. I'm done with all this. This is too much. I give up. And he just raises his hand and surrenders. And the guards are like, we're not really a take prisoners kind of group. We're just going to shoot you anyway. And he's like, well, here's the thing. Your boss ordered you to kill me only after that girl got killed. But she's now alive again. So don't you think that's worth reporting to your boss and probably keeping us alive until then? Because what if he changed his mind now that the girl's alive again? I don't want it to be you if you make the wrong call now that this girl's alive again. And Bart just like thinks for a second, and then it cuts to Belichick inside being like, you brought them into my building, you stupid piece of crap. You're fired. All of you are fired. The rest of you idiots come with me and shoot the ones that were fired. So he immediately starts laying into them. And the one that made the call is just like, I'm sorry. He made a compelling argument. I just thought. And he's like, oh, you thought. Anybody else want to think around here? And Belichick pulls out his own gun, shoots the guy in the face, and be like, good, awesome. Now get out there and shoot them in the heads. But, of course, the green team have already managed to escape their captors. They bust through the door, now fully powered up, and just been like, Belichick, you are just awful. You're just the worst type of person. He's like, oh, you and me aren't so different. We're both capitalists preying on weakened people. And Commodore's like, no, I'm not that. I don't do that. I'm rich in good ways. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. I'm sure you truly believe that. So at that point, they make the claim of like, Belichick, what was it all for? All these experiments with these suits. Why did you want it so bad? And he's like, because I wanted to see if I could. And frankly, you just happened to drop in my lap. And also, I was hoping that by targeting you specifically, Commodore, I could take your finances via power of attorney. He's like, what do you mean power of attorney? Yeah, one of my parents would have to be involved for that. And he's like, yeah, exactly. And we get the reveal that Commodore's father, who I can't even remember his name, but the dude in the weird like smiley mask thing, he's still alive somehow. And he comes in and says, hello, son, daddy's home. Next issue is the last issue. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We got a very long explanation as to why Commodore's powers work. They explicitly say like nanites and all this other stuff in terms of like basically Iron Manning it. We get nothing in terms of JP turning into a werewolf, Muhammad turning into a ghost man, and then Cecilia just being able to phase in and out of reality, it seems like. Like, none of this gets an explanation. I don't know if I like that more or less. It feels more like they wanted to pad this out over, like, many, many issues, and then they were told, oh, by the way, you're being canceled, like, as they're writing issue 7. So they're like, oh, well, let's get everybody's powers out now, and we'll just say nanites. It's not poorly written, but it definitely feels rushed as hell. So overall, I'm going to say this is I'll give it a 6.5. I can't give it a 7. It's just too much happening too fast here. As much as I think it's an interesting-ish story being told, frankly, it feels a little bit listless. It feels like it doesn't really know where it wants to go, but it's just trying to get there before the entire series wraps up next issue. So yeah, join me for that. And that's it. That's all the comics from DC Comics this January 1st, 2014. God, that's going to take some getting used to. I mean, obviously that was a decade ago, so I really don't have to get used to it, but you know what I mean. Anyway, like I said, this episode's probably already very long. I won't know until I edit it, but frankly, it feels very long. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up as quickly as possible, but in the vein of holiday spirit and New Year's and whatnot, I want to leave you with a little bit of parting bit of advice here. And I'm being genuine. This is a real thing. If you make a New Year's resolution and you end up failing it, or you stumble on it along the way, doesn't mean you have to stop. You can just say, okay, and start again. There's nothing special about January 1st. Get back on the horse, keep trying until whatever you want is a reality. Yes, I can be deep at times. I do have that potential. I'm not just the funny comic book guy. Anyway, next week's comics. Let me just talk about that real quick. Next week we have Batwing, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Batman/Superman, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, Stormwatch, Phantom Stranger, and Swamp Thing. Sorry, also Forever Evil, Arkham War. I always forget those event books. They always slip right by me. So all that's coming out next week. Beyond that, not a whole lot more to talk about. Enjoy whatever is left of your winter holiday, depending on how you're celebrating it. Personally, I'll be at work again tomorrow, which sucks, but hey, someone's got to keep the world turning, I guess. If you have any thoughts on any comics that I talked about this week, last week, blah, 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 you know the drill. Hit me up in the comments. I want to talk to you. That's my New Year's resolution. I want to hear what you have to say. And then put a little heart on your comment to say that I read it, but don't actually have to reply to it in any meaningful way. That's what I want for you. Anyway, all that said and done, hit us up on Patreon, Discord, Reddit. Links are in the description. But until next time, always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.